Hello, I'm Debs. Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to my little studio. All right, so today we're going to have a little chat about a question I often get asked is, I really want to draw, but I really want to paint, but I just can't draw. Do I have to learn how to draw before I begin to paint? Now, the camp is certainly very divided on this question, and there are certainly a lot of people that sort of like say, well, if you can't draw by eye, it's worth nothing and you're cheating. And that, and I can remember I used to have the same attitude, and I would look at artists who would sort of draw away at great speed and create these wonderful, wonderful drawings in minutes, and I would be there sort of, and sort of I hadn't picked up a pencil since school when I started painting. And I can remember sort of thinking, well, when I very first started, I was 40 years old, and I didn't want to feel as if I had to go back to school. I didn't want to do hours of endless exercise and all these sort of technical things and whatever. I just wanted to play with some pretty colours, and paint and things. And so, but I sort of, I think, as I say, I had the same attitude, and I think, oh gosh, no, I've got to draw. And I would, I would do my drawing with my sort of basic knowledge of school days drawing and things, and I would create paintings and things. I mean, I love to paint, and I'd create these paintings, and often I would be disappointed, I would look at them and, whereas I would like most of it, I'd sort of look at it and think something's not quite right there. I don't know what it is. And I would get very frustrated, maybe I've got an eye slightly out of place or my perspective slightly wrong or something which kicked everything out. And as I say, I can remember being really disappointed. To the point that I almost gave up, I thought, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this. So frustrating. And then after some time of, putting the pastels down, but really getting that urge, I want to paint. I do want to paint. I started thinking about it, and I started thinking about those great masters, and I started thinking, well, they used the tricks of their day. They use they use grids or projectors or mirrors or all sorts of things that they used, whatever tools they had at the time. And I thought, well, if it's good enough for them, why can't I do it? So feeling rather naughty, I sort of really started questioning this, and I thought, well, cheating? Is it really cheating? I mean, who defines that notion? And if you have a head start, does that really matter? Because ultimately a picture is built up of many, many layers and different levels of light and shade and things, and that's what makes something look realistic, or like what you're painting. It's not necessarily the little outline that you begin with. And painting is far more than that, and especially with pastels, because they're a medium that move around. They're not static. You don't put a brush, let it dry, and then it stays there. They're quite movable and malleable. And so I did. I asked myself the question, well, is it really cheating? And so I thought, well, nobody's looking. And so I started to play around with some techniques to help me get that drawing right. And I'll show you one of these that, after I've finished chatting and things, I'll show you one of the ones that I use. And to be honest, once I started this, it just freed me up. I didn't have to worry. I didn't have to spend 4 hours doing a drawing that wasn't right in the first place, to then before I could even begin to paint. And it just freed me, because I knew that when I started off with my pastels, that what I was looking at, the eyes were in the right place, the nose was in the right place, etc. And then that, as I say, that gave me the freedom to then carry on and carry on and create a lovely painting, hopefully. And so that's what I want to share with you, and I want to help you feel not so bad. If you feel you can't draw, I personally don't feel it's a prohibitor to getting on and painting. And I'm certainly not saying, you know, that drawing won't help you, and learning to draw won't help you. It will. And thankfully now, you know, after 19, 20 years or whatever, I can now draw. And I you know, I draw by eye the vast majority of the time. But still, every now and again, I still do use a technique. If I'm doing a portrait, for example, that, you know, needs to be accurate and needs to look like, you know, I'm not just drawing a random dog or something, it needs to look like a person's dog. I want to make sure that my eyes are in the right place, that, you know, the expression is right, that the angles are right and things, before I begin painting. So as I say, every now and again, I will still use the trace down technique, which I'm about to show you. And for me, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. As I say, the painting takes quite a while to build up anyway, and everything moves, so I really don't feel there's any problem in it. So if you want to have a play and you want to actually start painting, I would say go for it, you know, and cheat away. As time progresses, if you carry on with painting, you will naturally learn how to draw. It comes naturally. And, you know, when you're watching telly or something, you know, just try picking something out. Have a little sketch pad past you. Try picking something out, like glass or, you know, whatever's around or whatever, and just try sketching away. And you find that that over time, you know, you do actually develop that knowledge and that skill without even realising it. So, as I say, that's my views on it. Totally up. You may disagree with me, and I'm sure many will. But I say, you know, if you want to have a go at painting and feel you can't draw, cheat away. So, let me show you how I do the trace down technique with pastels. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Okay, so let's make our life a little bit easier and make sure we get everything in the right place to start off with. All right, so the very first thing you want to do is print out your reference photo. Now, in this instance, all I'm interested really in getting the idea of is our little girl here. You know, the background and things, I don't need to particularly worry about that, other than perhaps where my horizon line is and, you know, sort of the rough shape of those back trees. But other than that, I'm not really worried. What I want to do is just get the little girl. Now make sure when you print out your reference photo that it's the size of, you know, of what you want in the picture. So I've worked out, you know, how large I want, you know, my little girl to be in the picture, and I've made sure that she's that size. Just as a quickie, when you're printing out, you don't need to obviously print out in colour, you know, save your precious inks. They're quite expensive on printers and things. So you can just do your printout in grayscale. Obviously make sure that you know, you've got all the areas that it's clear enough that you can see everything, where you're going to be sort of tracing over. But just a quick grayscale print will work fine for this. So as you can see, what I've done is I've done my printout, and I've taken my piece of paper, photographic. I've taken my photograph and switched it upside down. And what you can see me doing now is I'm going over the back. I've actually got a pan pastel here with a bit of sponge, and I'm rubbing the pan pastel into the paper. Now I've just choose a colour. That is sort of, I would suggest choosing sort of a mid to dark tone colour, something that's going to be within your reference photo, sort of the main colour of it here. And I often find a purple actually is a really great colour to do your underpainting with. You know, I use it often in a painting, so I find that's a really good colour. But you can use a black or a mid-tone grey, you know, mid to dark tone grey, or the predominant colour of your picture. It really doesn't matter. Now, if you don't have a pan pastel, you don't need to worry. You can just pick up one of your normal sticks of pastel and rub that into the back. You know, you don't necessarily need a pan pastel. What I suggest though is if you use a normal pastel, I would suggest perhaps taking a sponge afterwards and rubbing it into the back, so you don't get too much residual there. You don't want too much loose pastel dust, because it'll get your paper a bit too mucky. But however, in this case, I'm working over a pre-sketch, so it's got bits and pieces in it anyway. But as I say, if you have got a pan pastel, it's a great thing for this particular exercise. And as you can see, what I've been doing is I'm making sure that the back of the paper paper is covered in the particular areas where I really want to make sure that I've got the, you know, the detail there. So I just go over a couple of times, just covering the back of that paper. So now we've got our paper nice and covered on the back. As you can see, what I've done is I've put my drawing paper, my sanded paper on my easel now, and I've taped the photograph to the top of it, right side up this time. Now you just need to tape it at the top. Obviously, make sure it's nice and straight, and you've got it sort of lined up as to wherever you want things. Now, as I mentioned earlier, right, you know, I'm not too worried about the background and things. Really, just what I want to do is get the essence of where my little girl is going to go in my composition. You know, make sure that I've got sort of everything kind of roughly in the right place. So then, as you can see, what I've done is I've just taken a normal standard biro, and what I'm doing is I'm just tracing around all the areas that I want to, you know, that I want that head start in, the shape of the little girl and you know, the shape of her hair and things. And I pop in later where my horizon and roughly where my back trees are going to be. Now, you don't want to be pressing too hard. You don't want to be creating grooves in your paper, but you obviously want to make sure that your pastel is actually going onto the paper. And you can just lift it up and just double check every now and again that you're putting the right pressure on there. So it's up to you really just how much detail you feel you need to give yourself. Now, for me, I want to make sure that my little girl's in the right place, obviously, and that I've got the shape and everything about her correct. I'm not really fussed about the background too much, but I usually pop in my main angles, you know, like where my horizon line's going to be, for example. And maybe angles through the you know, angles of how the river is lying. Really, I'm not great with angles. You know, I tend to transpose them into different angles. So I usually find that helpful. But it's really up to you how far you want to take it. But I wouldn't go too far with it, because you just want to be creating those basics just to make sure that you've got those basics in the right place. Because you're going to be rubbing all the pastel in, and you're going to lose a lot of it, so don't get too detailed with it. I suggest, you know, because you'll end up losing it. So there we are, really. That's the technique. Literally just going around everywhere you want to put in, take your biro over it, trace it over, and then at the end you'll see when you lift it up, hey voila, you've got a little sketch there that you can start off with. All right, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this little chat and video, and I hope you find it helpful. I'd be really interested to know your comments and whether you're in the camp of agreeing with a little bit of cheating, or whether you feel that you really must draw. But I'd love to hear your comments, and also if you employ the technique, whether it's worked for you, whether you found it helpful. Okay, thanks so much. If you're watching on YouTube, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up, and if you can subscribe to my channel to help this grow, to get more videos on here, I'd really appreciate that. So click that subscribe button for me. But in the meantime, I wish you a lovely day. Happy painting.